Welcome to the Red Rose Film Club, a movie podcast that picks apart movies from the viewpoint of the political left. We love deconstructing movies almost as much as watching them, and wanted to share our conversations with our liberal, leftist, socialist, communist, Marxist, and Leninist friends. Hi, I'm Craig, and I'm with...
Hey, I'm Hal. Letterboxd says my most watched theme of 2024 was intense violence and sexual transgression. Guilty as charged, and I can't say I'm pressed to change this, but in 2024, I've also been guilty of backsliding into fear-driven paralysis politically, and in 2025, I'm trying to change that. So, Craig.
Yes.
What other pop culture are you getting into these days? We skipped this last episode.
Yeah, we did, because we
started to talk about it and then took a very sharp Oscars detour.
Yeah,
so.
And we're gabbing.
Yeah.
I haven't watched much. I was telling you before that I've been sick and got the flu, so that was fun. And I know some people...
It's very trendy.
And I know some people, I think maybe you're one, because we talked about it, when you get sick, you can like kind of just hunker down with movies and stuff. That's not me. I don't want to watch or look at anything. I want to sit on my couch and be miserable. And I did a lot of that. But I did see a few things, a few that I'm going to back up for. Because one thing that I had mentioned several episodes ago is a movie that I was very excited to see was Lee Whannell's Wolfman, his follow-up to like the lo-fi Universal Monster reboot that he did with The Invisible Man, and I was very excited, and it is a bit of a bummer. It is boring. It is really
the worst sin for a monster movie, honestly.
It is like, well, like, it's like this family, and like the husband is estranged from his father, who's like this off the land kind of like rugged dude who is involved in like maybe some sort of secret society of like wolfman hunters in like the Oregonian woods and shit, and has this cool setup. But I think the like biggest cardinal sin is Julia Garner plays his wife, and she has zero to do. She gets nothing, and I love her, and that part sucked. Because she's great. But I will say the special effects were pretty cool. I do like the thing that made me excited for the movie was I like the idea that he like changes into a werewolf over like an evening, so it's not all at once. So like it's just like various scenes getting more and more disgusting looking as he's transforming. So yeah, the special effects are like cool and kind of gross at times, but there are parts where like they're unintentionally funny. And I kept this is such a obscure reference, but like do you know Gino Vanelli? I don't know who that is only because of this SCTV sketch, but he was like a Canadian singer with like really like weird facial hair and just weird hairdos throughout. And on an old SCTV sketch, Eugene Levy did an impression of him where like he would sing and then turn around, and every time he turned back, he would have like a little bit more beard hair on his face. And there were like parts of Wolfman where it was like the camera cuts away and cuts back, and he's like transformed a little bit more in like what was supposed to be like 15 seconds. And I was kind of giggling throughout that, but it was just a disappointment.
How was Christopher Abbott's performance? I love him.
That's He's the husband. Yeah.
He is the wolf.
The wolf man. Yeah.
Indeed.
It's fine, but like there's just no payoff to any of the setup stuff. Like the like premise of like him being estranged from his dad and like trying to, so like the whole like I guess emotional tension is he's trying to raise his daughter in a way that she won't be fearful the way that he was. But they just like fumble that at every opportunity. So like, I don't know, a lot of the big like emotional moments just come off as silly, but it's not, I mean, he's fine. It's just the movie's kind of a stinker. But a good one that I watched was I've been watching some Don Siegel movies, and I watched Riot in Cell Block 11. Have you ever seen Riot in Cell Block 11?
Not.
It is awesome. First off, it is like so far ahead of its time in that it was made in 1954, and it's like a prison movie. Where they're rioting, the prisoners are rioting, kind of like inspired by a lot of the prison riots of the time. But it's in 54, which is like, you know, still Hays Code, though maybe not as strict. But I was just shocked in the way it presents the prisoners, like even the ones who are like, you know, there's a mixture of different types of criminals, I guess. And there's like ones that are supposed to be just straight up like violent sociopaths or whatever. And then like small time crooks. But I was just like blown away by how the movie focuses so heavily on like humanizing the prisoners and while still being like really fun and like this kind of a I was gonna say barn burner. That's not the right word, but just like a great like little thriller, a little prison thriller. But yeah, you should check it out because I feel like you specifically would love it.
I will add it to my list. I do like a prison film. I did not. I'm not going to talk about it this time, but the stuff that we didn't cover, I had planned to talk about several women in prison films that I had watched. So sounds like something that's less exploitation than that.
And it is shot like heavy documentary style. Like it's great. I loved it.
All right, I'll add it to the list.
And a couple nights ago, I watched a movie that I imagine is divisive amongst people just because it's style and how weird it is, but I loved it, which was Soderbergh's new movie Presence, this ghost story movie. Have you seen it or know anything?
I am fully aware of it. I had tickets to see it and then wasn't feeling well and ended up canceling them, and every friend who saw it hated it. So
okay, cool.
I did not go, so I'm curious to hear what you enjoyed about it.
I just like Soderbergh, and I'm always down for like his weird experimentation. So like, do you know the general conceit of like how it's shot?
It's from the point of view of the ghost.
Yeah, right. Which it doesn't acknowledge that often. Like a lot of times it just feels like the camera floating in and out throughout the house. Like my wife and I were arguing for the first like 20 minutes if it was supposed to be from the ghost or not, and then like it picks up a book and then we're like, okay, so it is from the ghost.
A few friends described that it was like physically disorienting, and as someone that gets motion sick pretty easily, that is so not appealing to me.
Maybe not. Yeah. I will say it's not like, it is disorienting, but it's not the camera moves are still like fairly like fluid and graceful, if that makes sense. It's not like a lot of herky-jerky camera movements. So I don't know, maybe depending on your level of tolerance for motion sickness, but
you know, as we've talked about with Soderbergh before, it's like I appreciate the man has the goal and the artistic vision to try a range of things, and not everything is going to land, but you can't innovate without taking the risk that you know, sometimes it might not and sometimes it will.
And the plot does devolve and get a little silly, especially like a twist at the end is pretty silly, but I was just in it for because it's short too, so it's not like, I don't know, it never wears out its welcome, the like conceit of it, of the camera like only seeing it through the perspective of the ghost. But yeah, I had fun with it. And then one that I really had fun with.
I am very curious to hear your perspective on this because I'm interested but haven't seen it. So
I love Stavros Halkias, and he wrote and stars in the new movie Let's Start a Cult, which is like basically Stavros kind of playing a version of Stavros, but he's involved in like a who are the rocket people? The asteroid cult. God damn it, the Nike tracksuits and all that.
Heaven's Gate?
Heaven's Gate. They're like a Heaven's Gate type cult that like...
At first I thought you were talking about like a comedy troupe or something. Sorry. And I was like,
The rocket people.
Yeah, Heaven's Gate.
They're like, he's involved in like a Heaven's Gate style cult that like they all find him too annoying, so they do their mass ritualistic suicide when they send him out to the store. So he comes back and like everyone's dead and he's like, oh man, and then like it picks up a few years later and he like happenstance runs into somebody who was involved and they want to start it again because it was like he's this loser who like for once felt accepted in this group that hates him, and so they try to restart a cult, and it is you know, it's funny, it's good.
I'm glad to hear he's a funny guy. My general feeling is that he's not very good at stand-up, but he is quite, you know, which has kind of been his most recent venture prior to the movie, after since you know, podcasting and taking a shift, and he's really good at crowd interaction, but his like written jokes are not amazing. So I think him moving into comedic acting makes a lot of sense because he has great timing and he's a funny guy. He can he's a very dominant and unique physical presence. But I just don't think he is like, the writing of the comedy is maybe not his strong suit. So I was really curious about this film.
It's good. Like, it's in his style for sure. Like just the mixture of like really profane, but also like kind of like just like you little guy.
A rascal.
Yeah, a fat rascal.
Yeah.
That's the name of his comedy special. But there was one line that I've just been saying nonstop ever since, and it was also profane, but it was like the beginning. They're shooting like Heaven's Gate style those videos, like their exit videos of like why they're doing it, and like everyone's doing like very culty things, and then it gets to Stavi, who's like clearly been told that he gets like all the women he wants in heaven, and he's like, why am I doing it? Getting slurped in heaven while God's watching? You know it. I can't stop saying that. I'm sorry. Getting slurped in heaven while God's watching. But it's great. It's really funny. What about you? What you been watching?
So I just have two things that I wanted to bring up here. One's a movie. One is a book. So for the movie, last weekend I watched a Douglas Sirk film I had not seen before. I've brought him up previously. That I love him a lot as a director, king of mid-century melodrama. And in 1957, he released a movie called The Tarnished Angels. That is a Rock Hudson feature. And it's about a journalist, played by Hudson, who crosses paths with a group of carnies who do airplane tricks.
What, like
in an airplane?
In an airplane.
Yes,
okay,
in an airplane.
And I was imagining like
the man flies a small propeller plane, and the woman jumps out of it and does tricks with a parachute.
Okay, like old like on the wing type shit and like a air ballet. Okay,
yes,
cool.
Very the whole idea is it's like, oh, he was in, World War II and then come back and able to use this skill, but he's down on his luck. Right? And it's in classic Sirkian fashion, melodrama with conflicted romances and love triangle and alcoholism and violence and emotional outbursts, and the performances in it I think are some of the best for the genre. Like, I really blew me away and loved it. Yeah. Highly recommend if that is a subgenre you're interested in.
I need to watch some of his movies because I don't know what are rattled some off because I don't know if I've seen
All
any.
That Heaven Allows. Nope. Inherit the Wind.
Yep, saw that one in high school, so I don't remember it that well. But that's a blind spot for me that I need to add to my list.
Yes, I'm quite a fan of his, and I hadn't seen this, and I love Rock Hudson, so I was like, I gotta make sure that I prioritize this. But Robert Stack plays the other guy, and he is brilliant and seething. And then I forget the woman's name. Her first name is Veronica, I believe, but she. I think it would be very easy for, it is often true with anything Sirk makes, this material would be very easy to have it fall into a soapy realm. That melodrama can lead over into being overly sentimental and tacky, and instead it's like it just guts you.
Hell yeah. And I'm also seeing it was written by William Faulkner.
It's based on a short story by William Faulkner.
I was going to look into, because on IMDb he just says writers William Faulkner and George Zuckerman.
Yeah, so. I mean, he's credited because that's how it works, right? Because it's based on, but it's not. He was not involved in the production of it. Portnoy, I think, is the name of the short story.
Oh, okay.
That it's based on.
Did Faulkner ever get involved in the movies? I can't think. That would be probably a disaster. Wasn't he just kind of like a grump? Just kind of like a loner grump. Yeah.
Very much in line with what's happening on screen in this film. But the other thing I wanted to bring up is I recently finished the audiobook of The Message by Ta-Nehisi Coates, which is his book that came out last year. that everybody was real big mad at him because he talks about Palestine in it. How dare him?
Yeah, it's the book you'd find in an extremist backpack. Right. Which is what that idiot on CBS Good Morning told him when he interviewed him. Of course, like he's brilliant. It's brilliant. I think the thing that is obviously very obscured by everyone being unable to engage him because the word Palestine triggers insanity in some people's brains, is that it's a book about writing and the power of writing is like actually what the book is about. And isn't like the Palestine stuff kind of a chunk of
the fourth of 4 chapters. And for the audiobook, right, in terms of like percentage, I would say it ended up being about a third. So it's the last chapter, but it's about a third of the total book. It is very prominent. I'm not trying to push it aside as not being central. It is really valuable, and he is definitely doing, I mean, as we've talked about before when we've discussed him, like doing something very analogous to like the work W.E.B. Du Bois did, right? Of viewing it as his mission to talk about the world as he sees it and connect the dots between the ways in which racial domination in America is connected to racial domination in other places. And his discussion of his experiences in Palestine, really interesting. And he talks about being racialized in Palestine, like being blocked from entering his own hotel by Israeli guards, for example.
When did he go?
It would have been a couple of years prior to the publication of the book, because it's like October the 7th. First chapter is basically about his experience essentially being undiagnosed ADHD, like basically saying like generationally I was not ever diagnosed with that, but this is for sure my experience, and connecting what it meant for him to learn outside of formal contexts to that experience, and being the way, particularly obviously as a young Black man or boy at that point in time, he was labeled for his behavior, and how he had to seek other venues outside of formal education to really learn and explore the things he cared most about. And then the second chapter is about a teacher in South Carolina who taught Between the World and Me, and they were trying to fire her. And he goes to
Jesus.
Right. Like so this is why like it has to have been relatively recent, because like everything that's happened was like in this most recent wave of political inanity. But so like he goes to South Carolina to report on the school district hearings and meetings that pertain to her. She wins. And then the third chapter is about he goes to Senegal, which is where his family has, his roots are from Senegal. And he goes to Dakar, and he's never been to Africa. So he talks about that and how his books reached Africa before he ever did, and kind of reflecting on the power of language and that way. And then the fourth chapter is about Palestine and the importance of the fact that, like, one stat that he lists is he did basically a content analysis of all of the major news, like legacy media publications that have op-ed sections. And of those op-ed sections that talk about the articles that talk about Palestine, less than 2% of them were written by Palestinian people or Palestinian Americans or some equivalent. And so he talks about how the power of hearing truth from the people who have experienced it. So Palestine's a really important part of it, but really the book as a whole is about like the political import of writing. And even though a lot of the book is about horrible stuff happening, I found it to be a hopeful experience to read it. So, and I want to say the audiobook was like 6 hours. It's not long. Yeah. So I would encourage folks who are trying to find something that is like realistic and pragmatic, like not ignoring horrible stuff that's happening, but trying to find that kernel of hope. I found that in this book.
Awesome. Yeah, I got to read that. I think I might have the audiobook downloaded as well and just haven't gotten to it. But I was gonna ask, can I go back and say one more movie that I saw recently that I left off, but I just saw it this week. I saw Heart Eyes. Have you seen Heart Eyes?
I have not.
You know, it's like a goofy slasher movie, and it's really, really fun. It's the Valentine's Day killer or whatever, and I will say it is definitely fun, but I was a little disappointed in that it's not quite it is really trying to be a horror comedy, like rom-com mashup, and it is all those things, but they don't gel together. Like,
that doesn't shock me. I'm kind of struggling.
I'm comparing it to like Shaun of the Dead, where the comedy and the horror work really, really well together and are like, like one element kind of feeds into the next or whatever.
Right, like horror comedy, that's not confusing to me. It's like then also romance, like
so like there's like, which it is like it hits an odd tone because it is like the setup is this guy, the Heart Eye killer, is like killing people every Valentine's Day, and this is the third now Valentine's Day. The previous two have had like massacres in major American cities, and then it's happening in Seattle in this one. And the like two leads are like I don't know them, two hot people that are like have a meet cute at a coffee shop or whatever. So like all the beats of like them we bumped our heads against each other, and like there's like a lot of those like cliche moments. They're just framed around the fact that like a psychopath is chasing them at the same time. So like they're having these like rom-com meet cute moments, but also while they're being chased. And it is a lot of fun, but I did want like all those elements to kind of jive in a way that I don't think that they quite work as well. And then parts of it are like kind of lazy. Like there's one part where like the friend character gives a monologue where like they just put in a bunch of different rom-com names in the monologue. And I was like, okay, well now we're stretching it. But there are a bunch of like gory, disgusting like kills and like gross stuff, including like the first 5 minutes where a girl climbs into a winery, like a mechanical like cask. I don't know the words, but it's like I think it's a cask. Like it's metal.
Is it? They're squishing grapes, yes. And the woman gets squished.
Yes,
okay,
yeah,
got it.
It's a grape squisher, and she climbs in it and gets her little grape squished. And there's like it's some fun stuff, but I did want to talk about Heart Eyes because it's just so goofy and silly.
It's hard to imagine those genre conventions blending well together, especially if I think about one of the things that works about a rom-com is there's some like fantasy fulfillment element, and horror obviously involves some degree of fantasy in a pure sense, but they're at cross purposes with each other, whereas like violence can be absurd and thus funny, but like love is not murder. I don't know. I will say the funniest. You can write that down, by the way. Love is not murder.
The funniest joke is that the two detectives who are like chasing the Heart Eyes killers are just named Hobbs and Shaw, and no one. They don't seem to recognize that until the character points it out to them. They're like, "I'm Hobbs and I'm Shaw."
That is bad intertextuality. That is some fucking Deadpool-ass motherfucking garbage.
Well, it's never really brought up again. They're just like...
That's what I mean. It's somebody just... one of the writing staff just incorporated that in hopes that it would it would land one joke.
Yeah. And you know what I just realized? Is
you've named the whole characters that for the whole movie. Like,
one of them who is Hobbs or Shaw is Jordana Brewster, who is...
who's
the movies.
No.
But you know who the other one is, who I did not realize until afterwards? He's like the grizzled detective that's like wrong about everything. He's like, I've seen some shit or whatever. It's Devon Sawa.
Interesting.
Yeah, he's not in it that much, but not anymore though. He looks like time came for him, even since the last few things.
Time comes for us all. Watch your mouth.
But he is supposed to be like kind of a grizzled old fucked up detective or whatever.
I will say, I'm like, Easter egg, stupid. I do kind of hope that I don't know if you've seen the new Final Destination.
I saw the trailer for
it. Which I have to say, I kind of didn't love. It didn't.
Did we see the same trailer? Was the scene with the guy at the tattoo shop? And
Yeah, there was just some stuff. As someone that has a septum piercing, I mean, I have not worn it in a long time, but like, it's really easy to take your septum out. It doesn't make any fucking sense that like his whole nose would rip off or whatever.
Right. Also, how do you die from that?
But
Death by nose.
I'm optimistic, and sure. I hope that maybe Devin Seawa, old Devin Seawa will show up for a moment.
He was in one of my favorite bad movies of the last 5 to 10 years, which was The Fanatic with John Travolta, directed by Fred Durst. Yeah. Which has the funniest line ever. I might have even said this before, where because Fred Durst directed it, and there's like a scene where like Devin Sawa was taking his kid to school, and like they're just not connecting, and he's like trying to be like the cool one. And I think Nookie comes on the radio, and Devin Sawa was like, out loud, Limp Bizkit. I love them, man. You ever got into Limp Bizkit? And it's just so fucking...
A coworker who is like almost exactly 5 years older than me earlier this week asked if I knew who Limp Bizkit was, and then before I could answer was like, you're probably too young to know who Limp Bizkit is. So... Wait... I don't know.
Only 5 years older than you?
She did not know my age at the time that she said
it.
Then. But it's nonsense. Of course, I know who Limp Bizkit is. We're all cursed with this burden.
Yes, of course. I also want to say that the first line of that movie is John Travolta walking into a store and going, "I gotta poop." Is the very first line.
That is what I thought you were going to say, because I recall you saying that specifically before. Burned into my memory.
That movie's awesome. I mean, it's really terrible, but it's great fun. Well, why don't we move on to current events, which I'll be honest, I have been in a bit of a downer mood lately.
I have to poop.
In general.
Sorry, I have to
like
be honest.
John Travolta. I've like just... I mean, the state of the world has been a part of the thing that's put me in a downer mood, and I have avoided the news for like the last 2 or 3 weeks for the sake of mental health and everything else. So I don't really have a whole ton to contribute, and I feel like yes.
So this is a perfect segue, because what I wrote is, instead of myriad things, and I'm sure in future episodes we will dig into, but what I wanted to do was take a minute to honor those who have resisted so far in this administration. So I think that is, again, it's like a kernel of hope. It's not like everything is great, we're so happy, but it's better than only reflecting on the horrors and feeling and drowning in them. So I wanted to take a second, like I said, to honor those who have resisted so far. So there's been a lot of reporting on like the hashtag AltGov. It's inspired by the first Trump administration. If you recall, the National Park Service, there was a group of former employees who made social media accounts that were like National Park Service or and so a bunch of different entities have or a bunch of different former staffers or current staffers have created similar accounts associated with different entities or named after different entities. And one of the things that they've been doing is challenging Trump administration misinformation. So on their social media accounts, if Elon is saying some dumb shit about, we cut X number of employees, we fired 90,000 employees, they will go on there and be like, in this specific department, actually 1,000 people resigned themselves and everyone else is still here, right? So I think that is a powerful tool of resistance, of not allowing fascist propaganda to bloviate and overinflate their impact. I also wanted to bring up that there is an entity that formed called the State Democracy Defenders Fund that's representing a coalition of businesses, unions, veterans, and conservation orgs that is suing to block firings in federal court in California. Two top security officials at USAID refused to turn over classified material to the fucking douche. It's such a humiliating thing to have to even call a government entity that. Like okay.
And it's just shocking how
I'm like gonna really restrain myself and not just launch into a rant, but it's the humiliation and degradation is multifold
for him especially. Like, I don't
for all of us,
but like, I don't know, that guy. I'm gonna go on a limb. There's something not right with that Elon guy.
It's like the fucking fascists in Solo, right? They force you to eat shit while eating shit themselves. Right. They're degrading you, but they're degrading themselves all the same.
Yes, like I don't know, one of those like YouTube prank videos where it's just like we all fall down a well together, but like, you asshole, or like, right. It was like, you're here too now, motherfucker. I have a perfect example.
Mr. Beast buried himself underground and stayed under there for a week, and it seemed like he was going to have to Baker Act himself to get out of there. So that's not what they call it in California. They use a code. Yeah,
Beaster Act.
50. Beaster Act. Wow. Except he's not in California. He's in North Carolina, and I'm sad that I know that. Anyway, that's where his compound is.
North Carolina?
Yes. No. Mr. Beast is
the one that says the N-word all the time. PewDiePie, yeah.
Yeah, no, Mr. Beast is from North Carolina. Like,
I've never watched a video.
Smart. Save yourself.
Well, have you been to a 7-Eleven lately? Because you can get your Beastables. He has a bunch of terribly branded food and drink items that are...
I don't want to crack open the vault of my brain that knows a lot of Mr. Beast's information.
I want to see what that vault looks like, honestly, because I know a little bit. But
I watched his Amazon show. That's all you need to know.
The game show one?
Yes.
Hell yeah.
I have seen all of it.
Hell yeah.
So I'm making really good use of my time on this planet that we have left. And then the other kind of example of this, not of Mr. Beast and me wasting valuable, precious time, but of those who have resisted, is that there was a senior Treasury official who resigned, and federal workers staged protests blocking the doors to various federal buildings over Elon's team's access of sensitive information, including people's social security numbers, etc. And then something else I want to bring up in this context, which is not honoring because fuck them, but a recurring theme I've tried to tease out on the pod is that elite conflict is a really prime political opportunity. And the fact that the FBI, the State Department, Homeland Security, and the Pentagon all told their staff not to respond to Elon's time-sensitive 5-point prove yourself email last week, or like last Friday, with the expectation that they would submit it this past Monday. That's not nothing. Health and Human Services experienced internal conflict to the agency where RFK said to do it. And then HHS's general counsel said, don't do that. And we've also seen Republican legislators question Elon and Trump in the media, including like Senator John Curtis of Utah. So again, I'm not honoring those people. I'm just saying there is hope in the fact that elite conflict around the rollout of these policies is taking place.
Yeah. And it just, I mean, I don't know if this is a silver lining because it's not, but like these policies are not popular and they're doomed to fail, but there's going to be so much collateral damage done in the meantime that it's just, I don't know, depressing.
Oh yeah. I'm not saying it's
just
not
like
depressing.
No, I know. Just like everyone,
I just trying to find some things to.
I know. I've just been so
to.
like doom pilled and just like.
Yeah. I'll just say that, which is obviously like depression is not something we can control. So I'm not saying this in a like any shaming sense, but doom only helps them.
Yeah.
So.
True. We just need, I think, get ready for this. This is going to be a good one.
Oh, God.
I just think that...
You have to poop. No.
I just wish that for me, living in this fascist state, that there's some sort of fantastical world that I could escape to.
Oh, I see.
This is good. What we call a segue.
That was a good segue. I'm impressed. So, taking that segue and climbing it like a rope to a fantasy world, we are embarking on a new series. So continuing the tradition of understanding our current environment through historical analog and expanding upon the Italian fascism series from last summer, we're going to be diving into 3 films about Francoist Spain. You want to go over what our plan
Sure. So
is?
for this episode, as you probably already know, because it's in the title, we are going to watch Guillermo Del Toro's 2006 film Pan's Labyrinth. And we will continue that discussion here in just a moment. But for the next episode, which will be episode 52, we're going to watch Raza from 1942, which is a film that Franco actually wrote. And we'll discuss things like propaganda, conservative aesthetics, and the lies that fascists tell themselves. And then for the third episode in the series, which will be episode number 53, we're going to watch the 1996 movie Libertarias?
I don't speak Spanish,
Tomato,
so your
tomato.
guess is good as mine. Yeah.
And talk about the anarchist contributions in Spain, and the fascist struggle in Spain versus elsewhere, as well as feminists involved in the revolution.
And specifically with that one, I'm really interested in teasing out the role of anarchists, which was much more prominent in Spain relative to kind of the balance of the leftist coalitions in other countries, where like in some places we see Marxist-Leninists are like the dominant, resistors. All right. So before we go into talking about the movie itself, I love to talk about some history. So we want to take up a few questions. First, we want to talk about what happened during the Spanish Civil War. So the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century was a period of major transformation for Spain. Anti-colonial revolutions led to the collapse of their Americas empire. A colonial war raged in North Africa. Their king was deposed, and the Second Spanish Republic emerged in 1931 following open elections. The Second Spanish Republic began reform around the Catholic Church's control over most social, economic, and political institutions. Bitterness around loss of power and acquiescence seethed in some sectors. Fascist groups, including the Juntas de Ofensiva Nacional Sindicalista, or known as JONS, and Falanage, formed. Franco himself came from a family of many generations of men who served in the Spanish Navy. The decay and fall of empire cut close.
Then, in 1936, after the Popular Front, a coalition of left-wing parties wins the Cortes, the Spanish parliament election, and bans the Falange following their attempt to assassinate a socialist member of the Cortes and a trade union leader. General Franco's army mutinied against the democratically elected Second Republic, starting first in Morocco and then bleeding into the mainland. In October of 36, Franco was named Caudillo, the head of state. By July 1937, bishops assimilated behind Franco and the Vatican followed suit. The resistance coalition included socialists, communists, left Republicans, Basque nationalists, and anarchists. Soviets did supply the Republican government and worker militias. Initially, the resistance included several thousand who traveled from the U.S. to join the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, the first fully integrated U.S. Army, actually. And about 35,000 more joined the international brigades from around the world.
During the Spanish Civil War, Italian and German fascists and Nazis lent material support, including famously when German planes bombed Guernica in 1937, killing thousands of civilians. Michael Parenti writes that the major economic interests of Spain contributed and were assisted by at least one Texas oil millionaire and other international capital. One of those major economic interests, Juan March, a magnate once called the Rockefeller of Spain, was previously known as a philanthropist and modernizer, but aligned with the other oligarchs once his economic interests were threatened by the reforms of the Republic. The US, the UK, and France adopted a Neutrality Act that really was just imposing an embargo on the Spanish Republic, which ultimately aided Franco.
And in 1938, the Republican leader Juan Negrin asked the international brigades to withdraw in hopes the nationalists would do the same on the other side with the Axis powers, which of course did not work. By early 1939, Franco has formally codified punishments for supporters of the Republic in the Law of Political Responsibilities, including stripping them of voting rights. In April, Catalonia falls, closely followed by Madrid, and then the Republic surrenders. Of course, from there, on September 1st, 1939, Germany invades Poland and World War II launches. All told, historian Paul Preston estimates 200,000 people died in combat, and another 200,000 were murdered or executed during the conflict.
After the Civil War, the Francoists united around a commitment to Catholicism, as well as principles of autarky, which means like self-sufficiency for the country, not having to rely on trade. Family as the organizing social unit and basis for property allocation and management, and relatedly, private property. Prison populations exploded, and almost 500,000 people fled the country. He ruled until 1975 when he died, and funnily enough, he named his successor, Juan Carlo, who, as soon as Franco was dead, facilitated reform and transition to democracy. Though Juan Carlo did endorse a quote-unquote pact of forgiving, meaning that former fascists were allowed to remain in their roles and that there wasn't some purging. Reconciliation by way of ignoring. So the second set of questions that we're interested in before we launch into the movie is, was Francoist Spain fascist? And why look at Spain right now in terms of, we did Italian fascism, why not do a round on Nazis, right? So there is some debate among mainstream historians as to whether or not Francoist Spain should be called fascist. Here is where I land on that. Franco's victory was a result of fascist collaboration and consolidation of a coalition that extended beyond the purest youthful action for action stake resembling brown shirts or black shirt brawlers. It included conservatives, traditionalist monarchists called Carlists, who were motivated by restoring the Bourbon line. And as I described above, Hitler and Mussolini saw the strategic value of abetting and aligning with Franco, and reciprocally implicated Spain in their violent ventures. Nearly 50,000 Phalangists joined Germany on the Eastern Front in Russia, or against the Soviets, rather. Spain laundered German intelligence from South America. Spain lent Italy and Germany use of its submarine bases. Germans gained ownership shares in Spanish mines, etc. To get right to the point, I'm inclined to agree with Michael Parenti when he says, what the fascist state attempts is a final solution to the problem of class conflict. Those who repress labor and the democratic expression of workers, whether that be voting outcomes, preventing striking, preventing free association through organizing and group formation, are engaged in a fascistic project. And those who join forces to perpetuate that project, even if inspired by their own ends, like a mythological return to Catholic monarchical glory, they generate death, they abort freedom, and they curtail the proletariat's organizing capacities. I love a good operationalization and a typology, but may we not be so pedantic that we let the point whiz past our heads like a bullet. In terms of why we're looking at this in our current environment, I'm very interested in the violence that erupts at the junctures of major political and social moments, and the rejection of democracy. I'm also, as I brought up earlier, really interested in elite alliances coalescing and fracturing. Juan March's story brings to mind for me my number one enemy, Mark Andreessen, and his trajectory. So I'm sure we'll continue to engage these questions throughout our journey through the other films as well, but let's get into Pan's Labyrinth.
Hell yeah. So let's just real quick, the plot and how it fits into what we just discussed with the Spanish Civil War. Guillermo Del Toro's 2006 fantasy takes place in 1944 in Franco, Spain. The Republic has been almost crushed entirely, save for a few holdouts and guerrillas who continue to fight against Franco's military. Ophelia, the protagonist of the film, finds herself in the bleakest of scenarios as her mother has married and carries the child of the cruel and sadistic Captain Vidal, who is tasked with hunting down remaining leftist, communist, anarchists, and relics of the Spanish Republic. And though Ophelia's mother is too pregnant to travel, Captain Vidal demands that the baby be born where his father is, despite the dangers of warfare all around. Feeling hopeless and trapped, Ophelia discovers a fantasy world of fairies and fauns, which offers her an escape from the horrors of fascist Spain. Now, I always like talking about our initial reactions, and this is like a all-time favorite movie for me. I saw it when I was 18, and I'm like slightly embarrassed to say that, like, because I feel like I was too old to say that like it helped me discover international cinema, but like it was one of the first movies that I was something of renown to me. That, I mean, it is like the fifth, I think still the fifth highest grossing international movie of all time. So like obviously opened up a lot of eyes, but I do specifically remember because of this movie starting to get more into like Alfonso Cuarón, who was a contemporary and friend of Guillermo, and as well as like Hayao Miyazaki, who Guillermo has referenced a lot as inspiration. But I also feel like when I originally watched this movie, I was very taken by the fantasy elements because they're all just so like well executed, just the makeup, the tension in the scenes. And I guess, I mean, it's not a surprise, but this time around, this shit hit me like a ton of bricks this time. I haven't seen it in a while. I don't think I've seen it probably since Trump's first term, but like our own descent into a kind of like hopeless state of fascism made this movie more relatable now than I think it has been since it came out in 2006. Yeah, how do you like old Pan's Labyrinth?
Yeah, I love this movie. I think I was a freshman in high school when it came out. I think that the power of this film so much to do with the fact it's just the basically the pinnacle of representation of a story that is laden with political and historical meaning while being a beautiful fantasy that one can fall into and have no context for any of that. Like everything in the movie is self-evident. You don't need to know anything walking into it to understand that it's a movie about the power of resistance and of not compromising your ethics, even in the face of great pressure. That message is conveyed and delivered regardless of whether, you know, that opening card that describes Franco and that it's 1944 after, you know, he has won in 1939. You don't have to know any of that in order to receive what Del Toro is offering. Yeah.
And it like that, it is so like, there's so many like small, beautiful moments of like portraying like acts of resistance that I think are like really important because we know that for the most part, what the guerrillas in the movie were doing ultimately was futile because, you know, Franco went on for 30 something more years after that. But the moments of resistance, specifically like Dr. Ferrero and Mercedes, like those like moments of resisting and doing the right thing because, you know, it's the right thing in the face of like this fascist regime are just very like, I don't know, very beautiful and inspiring to me that like, no, we're not, I don't know, I'm just framing this around, everything is like feels so hopeless and bleak about it. But like just those moments of like, well, we'll get to it. But when Dr. Ferrero dies, I feel like I almost had a breakdown this time because it is just like a beautiful scene and a beautiful sequence. But we'll get to that when we get to it. Spoiler alert, Dr. Ferrero dies.
Spoiler alert for a movie that came out
20 years ago.
Almost 20 years ago. God, wow.
I know. I was thinking that.
Sorry. Oh my God.
I was thinking that the whole time too, that I can't believe that it's been 20 years. I mean, I know we're in old people territory now where we start saying that kind of stuff more and more. But this one is especially like, God damn, 20 years ago?
Yeah, what I'm about to say out loud, I've said out loud at least 3 times in the last several days. So it just feels really acute. But
I've got to poop.
Everything that either of my parents ever said to me about the quickening of the experience of time as you age is true. Yeah. And it just is fucking with me. But me too. One other thing I wanted to say as kind of a general about this movie, kind of zoomed out, that has nothing to do with its political balance at all, is that this is an exquisitely made movie that is a great representation of what it means to show not tell, and how to communicate a lot of information in a very like visually and through very targeted dialogue without a bunch of exposition. Like there is, within the first few minutes of the movie, we immediately figure out, if you're paying attention at all, that Mercedes is aligned with the resistance, right? We see her looking over the shoulder of the captain at the map where he's placing the little pieces for strategizing about going after the resistance that's in the mountain. And we see her going and kind of whispering to the doctor in order to urge him to go help the person whose leg is injured. And this all happens in like a really short time frame. And no one says Mercedes is a member of the resistance and she's embedded in this house right here. And the movie is full of things like that, where it's just like the characterization, the writing is so tight that it just, everything is pointed in the direction of his purpose.
Yeah. And I would say just as well is the captain's uncovering of who the moles are, like those little moments where he's clearly putting the pieces together. Like I love when he holds up the little vial of the antibiotics and compares it to the one in the doctor's case, and like they don't have to say it, but you can see those moments where he's slowly like becoming sure that he knows. It's just great. Also, like, I don't know, because it has been a while since I saw it, but like I looked actually it was in the Criterion essay that the fantasy elements are only like 1/5 of the runtime of the entire movie. And I feel like, having not seen it in a long time, it's felt like so much more than it actually is. I guess that's just a testament to like how cool those moments are. But also it's just I was so much more taken aback this time by the like story of the resistance than when I first saw it, and was like so just I don't know, I like love Doug Jones, I love like the monster movies, I was just so taken back by that. And I don't know, this time it hit me really hard, and I love this movie on a whole different scale than I had previously loved it.
Well, so this brings something that is a good transition for talking about Guillermo Del Toro in general and our relationship to him, is because I've talked about before, like, I am not a huge animation fan. I don't these are not, what I'm about to say are not the same things, though they can be linked. I don't tend to like media that's oriented towards children or was made with the primary audience being children, which is obviously not all animation, but those are not things that I tend to like. But I think like Guillermo del Toro has a way of engaging fantasy in a way, and not that this was aimed at children. It's not. It's a very violent movie, but I just say, because it bleeds out to his other work, that he has a way of engaging fantasy that there are a lot of different things to hold on to. Like you could watch this movie and just be very, as I did when I was 14 years old or whatever, and just be very enraptured with like the story of the tough little girl, right? Like that was like very a thing that I loved thematically,
which
right?
is still great. I don't want to like downplay that, just because the other parts struck me so much more. Like that little girl is fantastic, and all those like sequences.
But that there are like a lot. There's many things to grab onto, and he provides a lot of different entry points into his work, into any given film that he has, and this is really the zenith of it. I mean, if you look back on his career in terms of something that like you could watch with, I probably wouldn't recommend watching it with like tiny children given the amount of violence, but you could watch it with like a range of ages, and there are different things for folks to hold on to in it.
Yeah, for sure. But let's talk a little bit about Guillermo himself. And I know that, like I said, this was the movie that like got me into him. But I do remember I was very into Blade 2 as like a 14, 15, 16-year-old.
I love it.
Which I think still holds up, by the way. Like it is goofy and silly and like early, it's not Marvel Studios, but like that no man's land of everybody trying to do Spider-Man in the like 2000s, like have that success or whatever, and then he makes the weirdest fucking Blade movie where like Blade 2 is awesome. But I since obviously after, I think that was probably I saw Mimic as a kid because I never realized it was him. It was just like a gross, disgusting, creepy movie. But this was like my entry into Guillermo. Do you remember like your first time being aware of him? I think this probably
was as well. Because I didn't see his earlier like Spanish language movies until later, and this was, or his other Spanish language movies until later, and this was his last dominant like fully Spanish language film.
Still is, right?
Before he started making but I will say I love him. I was actually talking about, not to bring up the Oscars again, But you know, because the Oscars are tomorrow.
Hollywood's big night.
The gay Super Bowl, etc. There are a lot of people. I think a like kind of common discussion prompt is like, oh, what are the Oscar Best Picture winners that you think like shouldn't have really won, right? And people love to say The Shape of Water.
That should not have won? Yeah, okay, because it did, yeah.
And I love that movie. I am like a full Shape of Water defender. My family to this day calls my sister Dr. Shitbird, which is something that Michael Shannon says in that movie. Excuse me, Dr. fucking Shitbird is the actual line. And I love that film.
What were the other movies that it beat that people are... Do you remember?
Just like that people think that it doesn't have staying power.
Oh, boo.
Right.
Harsh words, and I'm sorry that you all had to hear that, but oh boo to those people, because it's like I don't know. I think the reaction is just because it's not it's just like a love story, and maybe the allegory isn't as potent as in Pan's Labyrinth, but it's not the same. It's not going for the same thing. I don't know. I love that movie too.
Also, it's about the Red Scare. I mean, it kind of is.
Yeah, you know, the allegory elements. True. I completely forgot that too.
Or Gina. Okay, Phantom Thread. I don't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well.
Yeah. Oh, and I forgot Lady Bird. I don't personally care for
that
Lady
was
Bird.
a big year.
And Call Me by Your Name, but I don't know that like the film as a whole is better. Also,
that was a crazy year.
It is a wild year. Yeah. So I understand like why there's some discussion on it. I'm just saying like I am a Shape of Water defender.
Yeah, me too. It doesn't upset me that it won over a bunch of other really good movies too.
Yeah, whatever this like action movie that I would love, I'm just bringing up PTA. It would be great because it's reported that his next film, which he's working with DiCaprio on for the first time, is supposed to be an action movie.
Okay.
And it would be fucking great if the first time in like decades that an action movie wins a significant award would be because PTA is like working with Leonardo DiCaprio. But
he's not done in action. I don't know. There's some sequences in Boogie Nights that I think that would make me very excited to see a PTA action movie.
Oh yeah. It's also supposedly an adaptation of Vineland.
I don't know what that is.
A Thomas Pynchon novel.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
He's done that because Inherent Vice. And
Yeah, so I'm thrilled. But anyway, my point is like, I think he's going to get his. I'm not worried. I'm not crying for PTA. Also, he's married to Maya Rudolph. He's having a great time.
He's never won?
I don't think so.
That's shocking.
I don't think so.
Oh, yeah, because he got beat by No Country when you would have thought There Will Be Blood. Crazy.
Right.
Can I say as a detour to continue about the Oscars?
Sure.
I have not been excited for the Oscars so much in a while. And actually, I'm going to tie this in. I love Conan O'Brien so much. And I have been giddy at the idea of Conan hosting the Oscars. I'm so excited.
I hope they don't have him on a short leash. I mean, you know, all things considering it's a national broadcast. I'm not saying he's going to be like, He's not going to be like offensive, I don't think. But like, he's weird. And I hope that they allow him to be weird and absurd like Conan is. Yes. Here's what I will say is that I quite like Conan as well and am excited that he is the host. Also, I know that Conan O'Brien likes movies.
Yes, yeah.
And that is oftentimes my biggest complaint about the approach that ABC tries to take to the Oscars broadcast is they're like, this is the award show for like the top of the line for American cinema and American cinema awarding and recognizing international cinema. And what we're going to do is hire someone and then write a bunch of jokes about how fucking movies suck. Yeah. And isn't this all stupid? And why are we all here? And I'm like... Why?
Or the other one that like Jimmy Kimmel has to pretend he liked Moonlight or something. Like I was like,
have you seen it?
It's like you're Jimmy
Honestly,
Kimmel.
Let's fucking Ludwig technique Jimmy to watch all the movies that we think he hasn't seen.
You said Ludwig technique, and this is how WWE brained I am right now because Elimination Chamber's on tonight. I was like, Ludwig Kaiser, who's a WWE wrestler.
No, a Clockwork Orange. I'm talking about a Clockwork Orange.
Yes. But the other thing that I want, so circling back, is one of my favorite things that Conan did is I love Conan's like, what do they call them, where they just go out, not in studio stuff, like shot elsewhere or whatever, but I'm sure you've seen Guillermo Del Toro's home is like completely decorated with shit.
That's not his house.
Okay.
I'm obsessed with Guillermo Del Toro, just so we're clear. Like, I love him. That is not his house very specifically because his wife does not like all of the horror.
So it's
not
just
horror
a
as a
building
genre.
where he keeps his shit?
Yeah, it's his studio. It's where he writes.
Well, there is a Conan segment where Conan goes to his studio, his house studio with all this.
It's a giant house.
Yeah,
It's like bigger
huge,
than all of our houses combined.
Stuffed like corner to corner with like movie shit.
Scary shit. I don't know that I could be in some of those rooms, to be honest. It's freaky.
Yeah. I remember like his living room just looked like a nightmare. It has like full bodied like
I just remember there's a giant like werewolf
coming out of the wall or something.
If I walked into that room, I'd be like, I'm so good. Thank you. I love you. I deeply respect you. I think you're great.
See, I love the old aesthetic. Except for the like full-size mannequins. Those would freak me out.
I like the aesthetic. It's just
too much.
I don't like giant animatronics. I don't like taxidermy. Like big things, they freak me out. Yeah. It scares me.
But I would recommend the Conan
it is,
just making jokes good. In Guillermo's house.
There's two other things about Guillermo not related to Pan's Labyrinth that I wanted to bring up. Please. One of them is that a thing that I really like and respect about Guillermo Del Toro is that he is very invested in the health of and protection of cinema as an art form. And I think it's really powerful that someone that like we have Scorsese, right, who like makes big grand sweeping serious dramas. Like it is not shocking to me that he is invested in this. It is delightful to me that a genre maker, a genre filmmaker is like, we have to protect cinema. Yeah. And he does a lot of things towards this end, but I saw this beautiful interview with him a couple of years ago when leading up to Pinocchio that released, his most recent film prior to the one that's about to come out with Frankenstein with Jacob Elordi, which I cannot wait to watch. Holy fuck. But Pinocchio, his stop motion film, where he said, like, we have to stop treating animation like it's a genre. It's not a genre. It's a mode. It's medium. And around that time, he tweeted one of my favorite tweets ever, where he said that he would give minutes of his life to hand them over so that Scorsese could live longer, because of the work Scorsese does around world cinema. And the last thing I'll say about this man that I love a lot is that when I was in Portland 2 summers ago for a professional conference, I went to the Portland Art Museum, and there was a full exhibit on the making of Pinocchio. And they had a bunch of his models. Like all the models? Yeah. Yes. And the various, like, throughout the stages of the development of the film. So as much as I don't care for drawn animation, I really love stop motion. Stop motion's cool, and it was really, really cool because they had, like his initial sketches and then like the initial figures that they make. And then they had full scenes set up that were automated or had like cranks that you could turn so you could see how they moved. That's cool. It was gorgeous and such a beautiful reflection on the fact that like cinema is art. Cinema can be art. Guillermo del Toro's cinema is art.
Yes. I did want to ask, do you have a favorite of his, or maybe one that you think doesn't get enough love?
I mean, Kronos
is awesome. When that dude sucks that blood off the floor, that's like one of the most disgusting things in a movie I've ever seen.
I'm pretty sure it's his first feature, isn't it?
You did that, I have to check that.
It's one of, I'm almost positive it's his first, but if it's not, it's very early on. It's just like a really bold early film for a filmmaker to make.
It is his first feature. Okay. Yep. Yeah. Kronos, Mimic, and then Devil's Backbone.
Okay. Yeah. It has like body horror elements. It kind of gives like Clive Barker, of this like these like kind of Faustian elements. There's some of the like insect obsession that we see. I mean, we see in this movie as well. Yeah. Has its early expressions there. So I like that film a lot.
Hell yeah. I'll say one that it's not like I do like it quite a bit, but it's not my favorite. Pan's Labyrinth is probably my favorite, hands down. But the one that I think gets kind of a bad rap because it had a horrible marketing campaign, but I like it a lot, is Crimson Peak. Because the marketing campaign was like scare the shit out of you, jump, you're gonna be hiding behind the theater seat, and it is like a slow burn gothic romance that like just has some ghosts in it.
I think that film suffers, I agree, from its marketing campaign, also from the fact that from his prior work, which is not to say that like artists have to make the same thing over and over again, but I think that were certain expectations. You know, this is the guy, he had basically not just come off of making the Hellboys, but like that culturally in America is what people are thinking about when you hear Guillermo Del Toro's name, you know, especially at that time.
And I'm looking at his page, like he was working like heavy genre at that time. He was like, he had written those books and was involved in that vampire show on FX. Where'd it go? The Strain.
Yes.
And then he had also done like Pacific Rim, which is like hella genre stuff.
So I think it's just, I honestly, I love Pacific Rim too.
I should rewatch that one because I remember being like,
the second one, which he didn't direct,
I don't think I saw the second one.
Yeah, the second one is whatever. But the first one I like a lot as someone that likes kaiju films, and you know, the cast is great. Some of my faves. But yeah, I think it's like, I think your marketing team is not doing you any favors if they're not trying to if they're not accurately depicting what it is. Yeah. And if it is a significant departure from your previous work, not trying to create a bridge to understand that. Like, you loved him for his like production design and his creature, all those things are still true.
And that shit is awesome in Crimson Peak.
All of that is still true, but like the emotional through line, that it's not the same at all.
Yeah.
It is much closer to The Shape of Water, however.
Crimson Peak? Or
like just in terms of the focus on
being like kind of existing like in genre conventions, but not
playing a role. You know?
And this will be a good segue back to Guillermo, because all great Doug Jones performances.
Yep, right.
God damn, I do like Doug Jones. He's like the most charming guy. If you don't know Doug Jones, he's like 7.5 feet tall and 93 pounds and like has the like most odd looking gangly body you've seen. And that is why Guillermo has cast him as every weird gangly monster in all of his movies, including as Fawn and the Pale Man. And
yeah, he had a lot of work in this. I wonder how many total hours in Doug Jones' life have been spent in a makeup chair having prosthetics applied to him. Yeah. Like probably a lot more time than he's on screen.
Yeah, well, the Pale Man had to have been the worst because that's like head to toe. Whereas like the Fawn, I think probably like some of those were like costume pieces.
Costuming, yeah.
And then the ears were like animated animatronic or something. Right, but the Pale Man is just all droopy skin all over his whole body. Like, God, that must have sucked. Jesus.
One of my favorite, not in the sense that it is positive, but just I don't know, it connects to something in my spirit. Stories about film at all is that the guy who played the Thing in the Fantastic Four movies from the early 2000s.
Chiklis.
Yes. Ben? No, that's the character's name. Michael. Thank you. Michael Chiklis. Gave an interview to the New York Times a couple of some years after the movies had come out that it took so long to put him into that costume that they didn't take him out between right, like if he was in like something at the beginning of the day and something at the end of the day, he would get there really early, they'd put him in it, and then he would just be in it. And because it was hard to move, they would literally just sit him in a corner like he was a fucking rock, and people would like forget he was there and set shit on him, and he had to go to therapy for years afterwards. I have a painting in my house that I made based on this, by the way, because it's like so it just is like Jesus. It's like grander than life. It just reveals a core truth or something. I don't know. It pierces me in my soul. That's about special effects, makeup, and psychological effects of it. Do you have a segue for that?
Well, his makeup in that is like miserable looking too.
It's very. It was supposed to be like very heavy. Right. Is like part of why he can't like.
He's like a bowling ball.
Right. He can't like. Okay, I'm gonna go over here and read. He was just like literally. I'm gonna sit there. So the painting I made of him has like a candelabra sitting on him, and he's crying.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's one of my better artistic productions.
I do want to make some more noise for some of these performances because, including Doug Jones, but Sergio Lopez as the captain is a fucking menace. That guy, he is really, really good in this. He's like from minute one, just scary as shit, and like the coldness of some of those lines.
Yes, it is one of those performances where I really have to be like, it's art, it's art, it's art, right? Like I'm like that man. I am frightened of him. Like the fact that you are able to like be that cruel.
Well, he has to like. I feel like he is. I mean, I don't feel like he is the representation of like Franco's fascist. Like he is the face of it, so he has to embody all of that. And like I think another good, like really great thing this movie does is like it is never like preachy about. It is just fascism is fascism. Let's show the fascists, but like the way that it incorporates like. Their obsession with like masculinity and honor and like all that shit in like really creative ways. Specifically, the story of his father and like the stopwatch of like his father died in battle and crushed the stopwatch so his son will know the time he died, and now he's been obsessed with like I don't know what is his obsession, like kind of recreate, like he wants to fix the stopwatch as a like testament to his own prowess in the military, but also to kind of like show up his father in a way is almost the reading that I get from it, that like he's the better military man or whatever. But well,
and I think that because he hides the stopwatch from his men, one of his underlings asks him about this tale that's been told about the captain. No, one of his underlings
tells it.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Table.
One of
that
his underling asks about it, and he denies that it is true. Right?
Oh yeah, he tells the whole story, and he says something like just a fairy tale or something like that.
That the sentimentality that he does have a sentimentality to him, but he one represses it, and two cannot let anyone else have access to it. His to the extent that he experiences a emotionality, no one else can be privy to it because it threatens his authority.
And that's a good launch into the like most violent, ruthless scene to me is the father and son hunters that they oh man, it's so brutal. And Jesus Christ. And then the pulling of the rabbit out at the end of the scene, like they say they were just hunters, and then he pulls the rabbit out, and damn, that scene is brutal.
Yeah, it's I think there's a few things that are brutal about it. It's and so to set this up, the fascists hear gunfire relatively close to their base, and so the captain sends folks out. They bring them back in, and they say, well, we can't tell basically if they're actually farmers like they say they are who are hunting, or if they're part of the resistance. And the captain tortures the son and then fucking beats his face in a unflinching, zoomed in, really gruesome, gory moment, and then shoots the father and then like shoots crying. The son. Oh, right. I mean, it's it's quite explicit. And then, like you said, they pull the rabbits out, and that obviously is a cruelty demonstrating that they were in fact hunting. And then we hear Mercedes say, as she takes the rabbits away, these aren't even big enough to cook.
Yeah.
Which then also is kind of interesting, I think, because there's a potential layer of, so were they in fact resistance? Right, like there's a lot of because
he finds like the pamphlet in his backpack too. I think of like some propaganda pamphlet. But
turns out people can be both. Yeah, and in fact, I also think farmers were a significant point of resistance against Franco's regime. Yep. So,
and I also think that it is just a good moment for like the overall themes of the movie. Like we get the big moments at the end about like blind obedience to authoritarianism, and I think that's just a great sequence of like that's a like obedience is just a mirage anyways, because these people were being like basically blindly deferential to the captain, and he still slaughters them or whatever, which I think is like plays well when we see others later on who are gonna like find themselves in a very similar situation of about to be killed, and then have like these great moments of resistance against it.
Well, and not just the people who are part of the resistance being on that journey, but also when he's beating the fucking shit out of the son's face, we can see the reactions on the face of the captain's men who are standing behind them. And this is kind of a reoccurring thing we see kind of sprinkled in the background throughout the movie, is when he's engaged in these explicit acts of violence, or his other like folks who are higher up in the hierarchy, men who are higher up in the hierarchy who are inflicting violence on folks. We see people standing in the background who are technically like part of the captain's, the battalion in that area or whatever, but they look shocked, reviled, disgusted, confused, conflicted. And so what we see is that basically everyone has a seed of doubt. It's just, are you willing to stand up and let that seed of doubt bloom into fighting for what you believe in, or are you just going to kind of stomach it, grimace, and then move on to the next act of violence?
Yeah. Well, let's start talking about our fantasy elements, because it's about this time that Ophelia runs into the woods and finds this kind of like a ruined labyrinth and meets the faun, who tells her that she is the reincarnation of a princess from another world, and in order to go back to that world, she must complete 3 tasks, each fairly gross and weird in like delightful ways. And the first is with the frog in the tree, which is awesome. I love that sequence of her in the like pretty dress that they just made, and then it just getting fucking ruined as well. She takes it off and then like is wearing the underdress, but then
it rains, and so
just
it gets
like as
ruined
the scene
anyway.
goes on, she's getting like more and more disgusting after like trying to keep the dress safe. But so she has to. What are the things that she has to put in its mouth?
There's some magic
This,
rocks.
like, rocks. Okay.
And she's supposed to fetch a key. So when she puts the magic rocks into the frog's mouth, then it vomits its whole body out of its skin. Yeah. But something I wanted to raise here, because it reminded me of the people under the stairs, is that this is another great film for the list of like precocious children being clever. Because we see that she has to reason out how she can get these rocks into the toad's mouth while she's very afraid and doesn't want to approach it, right? So she like kind of tries a couple of things, realizes that if she holds a bug in her hand, then she can get the frog to take
disgusting tongue.
That she can get the frog to take the stones at the same time it comes for the insect.
Damn, I forgot about the like vomiting his whole body up in reverse. That was so gross. I love that. This is so gross. And then we kind of, since we're talking about the challenges, we'll talk about the Pale Man if we think now makes sense, and then we can jump in and talk about some of the scenes that are interspersed, which are of the resistance. But the Pale Man scene is fucking great. He is so goddamn creepy. And like, I know I keep talking about how much I love Doug Jones, but just like, he's so good at using his body to act. Like, I just like the scariest part in that whole scene is when so she's told that she has to go in there, and what the fuck, how am I forgetting what she's supposed to grab in there?
She has to like draw the door with chalk.
Draw the door with the chalk.
And she's supposed to go in and not eat anything.
Yes.
Incredibly important that she not eat anything.
Even the grapes.
And she's supposed to use the key that she got from the frog to open one of, there's like 3 tiny doors. And she's supposed to, fetch something from the tiny door that the key unlocks.
But of course,
not eat anything.
She eats that grape. And it activates the Pale Man. But the scene that like the creepiest part to me is when she first eats it, and Doug Jones, just his fingers go, and then oh god,
it's got to pop the iron. I will say my favorite thing about that scene is the paintings of the Pale Man like impaling children.
And the pile of shoes in the corner. Yeah.
Once again, really impactful production design, communicating a lot of information.
Without having to say a word.
Yeah, no one, there's not voiceover of like, the pale man likes to disembowel children. Yeah. It's like, you just paint a beautiful mural. That's horrifying.
Get that mural from my house. Like the bedroom, just the pale man around. Yeah, that's great. And then, so while all this is happening, there's like ramping up. We finally see the resistance fighters as they chase like a smoke sign of like a campfire, and they find the little antibiotic that gets him on the trail of the doctor. And then we see that the resistance, well, we finally get like full confirmation that the doctor and Mercedes are working with them, and that Mercedes' brother is kind of one of the leaders of the resistance. And he tells her that, you know, they're fighting, but there's a squadron of like 50 more fighters coming. And then we also meet the poor ill-fated, I don't remember his name, but the young man with the stutter. In the meantime, there's another little bit of Guillermo fantastical weirdness in that Ophelia gets a mandrake root that's like a little guy, just like a little guy. That's
this
a root
guy.
That what does she have to do? She has to give it fresh milk and 2 drops of blood every night.
She has to keep it in fresh milk, yes, and then feed it blood.
Because her mom has like fallen sick in the like ending days of her pregnancy, and we already know from multiple conversations that we've overheard and that Ophelia has overheard that Captain Vidal has given strict orders to save the baby and not his wife if it should come to that. So Ophelia is like trying to save her, and we see like another like act of cruelty from the captain when he discovers it, and just for the sake that like he doesn't even know what it is. It's just that he doesn't like her playing with like childish things or whatever, and flings it into the fire, and then it lets out that little root scream, and it's very sad. And then the mom does die, which is so, I forgot that part entirely, that I forgot honestly how sad the movie is towards the end. But the mom
it was like he kills the doctor as the mom, as this simultaneous, like, because then they're coming to look for, some of the women's staff are coming to look for the doctor, and the doctor is dead. Like the captain has just killed him. And
that's the best. That's my favorite scene in the whole movie. Oh yeah. So they capture a few, like the resistance attacks the compound they're at. And
they attack a train.
The train
as a distraction.
Right. And then move in, and they like, and it's like a successful operation by the resistance, but they do corner and capture a few of them, including the young man with the stutter. And then he is tortured in the barn, and that, oh God. Great payoff though, because the captain gives a great villain speech about like the tools of torture that he's going to use.
But we see that he also gives that same speech later.
That's the payoff.
So it's just like
because she interrupts it when he does it the second time. Like she says, I can't remember what he says, but he doesn't get the full like. He doesn't get to the third thing of when he sasays it to her. I don't remember what she says, but she says something. Well, maybe it's when she stabs him.
Yeah, I mean, I think the important thing is that he's not, he's not speaking out of passion or motivated by some grand principle or ethic. It's like he's a villain who has memorized his little torture speech, and he's going to give his little torture speech.
And boy, when you don't actually see really much of the torture, we see the aftermath with his mangled hand, and then he brings the doctor in to like basically keep him alive, and the doctor realizes he's gonna die, so he gives him a lethal dose of morphine or whatever it is. And then that's when we have this great speech and moment where the captain realizes the doctor killed him, and he tells him, like, I gave you orders not to do that. And Dr. Ferrero says, but Captain, to obey just like that for obedience sake without questioning, that's something only people like you do, which is like the most cutting line I can think of for any movie in that like perfect context. And then the like, oh, goddamn, I love it so much. The like beautiful, like he knows like I'm fucking toast. And he walks out with like head held high and is just walking away from him. And the captain shoots him. and he still like walks 3 or 4 more steps before he falls.
And then the captain immediately goes and throws the mandrake in the fire.
Yeah.
And so we see that violence begets violence, right? Like he undercuts his own purposes.
Yeah.
And the murder of the doctor betrays his ability to, save his wife.
Yeah, and it's like also like the obeying the authority is the ultimate, like, everything else be damned, like even to my own destruction or whatever. Yeah. And then we have the finally Mercedes is figured out by the captain, and he is going to torture her as well. And then she has her big act of resistance, which is disgusting and awesome. Well, she stabs him twice. She gets him like in the back and in the chest, and then
gives him half of a Glasgow smile.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about this before, that you've listened to Doug Loves Movies. And I also did. And one of the most endearing things that I remember Doug Benson ever saying about a movie is him describing the scene where he says she puts a knife in his mouth and just shook it around a little bit, which is, yeah, it's so gross. And then the stitching himself up, and like the when he keeps opening and closing it. Oh, it's so gross. I love that. And then we're kind of coming into the end where we see Ophelia's like final task is that she must give the fawn or the labyrinth or whatever the blood of an innocent. After we think that the fawn has abandoned her for eating the grape. One thing that okay, again, Doug Jones doing great Doug Jones stuff, but the way
Jones Corner, when
he like appears and disappears from her room, I love it so much. Like, okay, I don't even know what to say. Yeah, he just like his body, it is all him doing it, but it is like
he's incredibly tall and yet hunched over at the same time. Like the worst posture on a very tall man you've ever seen.
Wicked Witch melts himself down to the floor in like a way that looks like he's sinking and disappearing, but it is all like Doug Jones's body doing it and hunching in, and it's so good. But then we get that finale where the blood of the innocent that the fawn is seemingly suggesting is...
Well, he says...
Your brother.
Well, he says, bring your brother, not explaining what the intention is. But then he says, you have failed by... not listening to me, right? By not kowtowing to authority. But if you unquestionably follow what I say now, you can be assimilated back into the fold. And so, again, right, this reflection of like fascistic expectations of like no free thinking,
blind obedience,
not life, blind obedience, not life affirming. And so she brings her brother because she's an innocent. She doesn't think that that's what's happening here. And then she quickly learns that he gonna kill him.
He gonna kill him, yeah.
He gonna kill him.
And then followed by Vidal, who's like at this point is going to lose to the rebels. Like they've basically completely overthrown, and he's kind of like blind with rage and more of like blind with, we see that like the idea of having a son to him is more important than almost anything, because he has that like masculine, like my name and my legacy will continue.
Well, and it's like we talked about during the intro, right? Like the Francoist regime is a traditionalist regime, very like, and distinctly Catholic, like very specifically Catholic, and very obsessed with the family as the organizing social unit. And part of that is things being passed from father to son. Yeah. Right.
And he shoots Ophelia, and we see that when she does die, but it is her blood that goes into the labyrinth, and we see that it was a trick all along. That would she blindly obey, or would she do what was right? And ultimately she does what's right, and though Ophelia dies, she does find her way into this escaped fantasy land where she's the princess and her father is, I don't know, Odin. I don't know.
Yeah.
Her father is like an Odin like figure on
the king.
The king of I do love the like, because we don't spend hardly any time in the fantasy land, but I do love that
you're there for like 4 minutes total.
But the distinct visual style of like the cool, like cold colors of the real world, and then the fantasy world is almost like the like really warm like yellows.
Yeah, lots. I was gonna say lots of gold.
Yeah, it's really really cool. And then like the coldest line in the entire movie when he like Vidal realizes he's dead, and he's like he gives the baby to Mercedes because he realizes like yeah, they're gonna kill me, but like Mercedes clearly loves the baby, and she says make sure he has my last name, and she says, do you remember it? And she says he won't even know your name.
Yes, he won't even know your name.
That is a great moment. And then his little ass gets popped. They got him. But yeah, I like ultimately I was like, I do feel like this is such like a beautiful movie to like the lost, the like nameless people who like whose acts of resistance will never be of note, these like quiet small moments. And I think the movie overall is kind of a tribute to the civilians, the farmers, the people like in these moments whose actions will be lost to time or whatever, but are not. This movie is very clearly saying they're not in vain and they're not futile.
Right, like the action's value and worth is self-evident.
Yeah, it's in itself. Yeah. Do we have anything else that we want to add to Pan's Labyrinth?
I don't think so.
You know what I forgot to do? Because I bet our boy would have went off on this.
I'm sure that he did.
I should have checked what Armand had to say, because I'm sure he had some wild shit for this.
I'm sure he is very interested in defending the Catholics.
I wasn't even thinking of it.
No
that
doubt
angle. Yeah,
that is the angle. And also, I'm sure that the ending really pissed him off, right? Like, oh, you can't block a father from sharing his legacy with his son.
Can't. I will say
damn women and feminists with knives in their aprons.
I was gonna try to just do a cold read to see if he had it, but the Google AI says, known for criticizing highly acclaimed movies. We'll just say here's what Google AI said that Armin said about it. That in the case of Pan's Labyrinth, he considered it to be cruel and dull, likely finding its dark fantasy elements and allegorical storytelling to be overly bleak and not as impactful as other critics. All right, that tracks.
I'm telling you, he's mad about the Catholics. I
For
feel
sure.
I feel
he
very
is.
confident in that assertion.
Yeah, that's his like number one pet project in movies, is make sure that the sweet Catholics are well taken care of.
God's not dead.
He's surely alive. God, we should do that movie. No, we shouldn't do that movie. That one's it is really good though. Motherfucker gets hit by a car and has a end of life conversion at the end, which was really funny.
I don't want to watch that. I will say I would be down for. I mean, we're gonna do a conservative film next, right? And that we're doing a literally Franco propaganda. But this Mark Wahlberg announced in the last couple of weeks they are creating a conservative movie studio. So whatever the project of that is, I'm sure we will watch it.
Hell yes. That is awesome. Oh, can I also add, I should have done this during the Reason Watches, but I did watch Flight Risk, the Mark Wahlberg. I downloaded it. I paid for that shit.
Does someone get thrown out of a plane?
No, it is so fucking boring. Like, it is unimaginably... It is so boring. Like, they are
That's
in the plane.
Worst thing that you could say about this movie, honestly. Like, you could be like, he gives a speech about how Trump is great, and I'd be like, but someone gets thrown out of a plane, right?
Also, in the first, 30 minutes, all three of the main characters reference themselves or someone else pooping in their pants. Which is...
It's insane to me that this is a reoccurring theme on this episode.
I wasn't trying to, honestly. But, Topher and him both imply they've pooped their pants at two different moments. And then the woman who's from something, Downton Abbey or something, she references it both times. So all the main characters are just talking about pooping in their pants. But it is so boring.
Poops Labyrinth.
So, okay, I do want to, I'm sorry, I'm going to go off on this drive a second. So like the whole movie is in this goddamn plane. Like they're in the plane in the first 10 minutes, which could be cool, but they don't do anything with it. And so there's like this other conspiracy that's happening with characters that you don't see that just plays out with her being like talking to somebody on the radio and being like, yeah, Jeff seems suspicious. And like you don't get any of the joy of like figuring out what's going on.
Can you look up what the budget of this movie was? Because I guarantee that explains that.
It all went to Mark Wahlberg. Like,
that's what I'm saying. Like it's just like Mark Wahlberg and they had one setting. Like they were like, wait, can we film this other, like the conspiracy in the other location? And Mark Wahlberg's like, Nope, not at all. And he, nope,
the budget
I'm too busy pooping
was,
my pants.
This is crazy. $25 million for this movie. Yeah, it could be, but it is. One thing I did love is the bald Mark Wahlberg is unaddressed. I did like that. That like
they don't explain why he's bald. He's just making that decision.
Why he's bald? Why he's
you know
bald?
why it is? It's because in his insane daily schedule, he was able to cut out 15 minutes.
If I don't have to shave and
get in another micro workout.
But also, like his character is wearing a
Pain and gain, baby.
Is wearing a wig that comes off. Like that's another element of it. It's like he has a hat with the wig kind of like almost like Slash style. It's not quite sewn in, but when it falls off, it lands in like Topher Grace's things, and like flinging it around.
Okay.
It is.
Somebody has to get to the bottom
of why he shaved his head for this.
This feels like a mystery for Who Weekly. I know he's a them, but
for who?
It's a great podcast that is about celebrities that make you go who.
Okay, then
so it's called Who Weekly because of Us Weekly. But he's a them. He's not a who. But I just need a like gossip, a minute gossip investigation because why the fuck would he shave his head?
So
maybe
weird.
That's why the movie cost $25 million. He was like, well, gotta hire someone to shave my head repeatedly.
Yep. And if you love fight scenes with people like close quarters just elbowing each other, there's like 17 of them of like, get off me. Because it is a tiny plane too. So there's like...
It's just a bunch of people who poop their pants elbowing each other in an enclosed space.
That's the whole movie.
All right. Like this room right now.
Wait a minute. Hold on now. All right. Do we have anything else to add for Pan's Labyrinth?
Certainly I do not.
Well, we will catch you on the next one with Raza.
Bye-bye.
Bye.